We all know by now that the Dallas Cowboys have two options when it comes to Ezekiel Elliott. Either you move on and you cut him, or you reach a pay cut with the former star running back. And now I think it's high time we take a look at the actual numbers. How do both possibilities look for the Cowboys? And tonight on primetime, we will talk about the one number that really matters about the upcoming Ezekiel Elliott decision. So do me a favor and hit the like button. Thank you for joining the stream. I'm excited about tonight. Let's get this week started with a banger. Here we go. ADC Sports Prime Time. Thank you for tuning in. Let's do it. What's up, everybody, and welcome to A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network. With a lot more content coming your way, make sure that you check out atozsports.com/Dallas. And as always, remember that Primetime is brought to you by our friends over at Freeman Mazda.net. We will talk more about them and the ride of the week in a few moments here on the show. Before we do any of that, though, let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott. Let me know just your initial reaction and your initial feeling to all of this. What do you think should happen when it comes to Zeke and the Cowboys? Do you think Ezekiel Elliott should be cut, or do you think he should take a pay cut? The Cowboys maybe should try to reach that agreement. That seems to be the two most likely outcomes for this conversation. I think this has been on the minds of Cowboys fans since the moment the season ended. Heck, even before that. But I don't think we've actually taken a look at the numbers and at the reality of the situation in which the Cowboys are at. And to me, there is one number that matters in this whole thing, in this decision. And we will get into that briefly here on the show. Shout out to all of you in the chat, by the way. Shout out to Toxic Tom. We've got Gregory. We've got KD in the room as well. We've got Katara Jones. We've got, who else is here? Jack. Thank you for tuning into the show. Let's take a look at the actual numbers of the whole contract here from Zeke. Toxic Tom is already saying, bye-bye for Zeke. Katara says he might get cut. Who knows? Gregory says trade him in a package deal. I don't think trading away Ezekiel Elliott is a real possibility, just because I don't know who would be on the other end of that trade. I don't think you would get anything, honestly, out of that. So let's look at the numbers. That's what I want to do tonight. And there's one in specific that we should get into. This is Zeke's contract breakdown for 2023. He's up for a $10.9 million salary. None of it is guaranteed. There is no guaranteed salary left on Zeke's deal. That doesn't mean there's not guaranteed money, because there are signing bonuses to take into account and all of that. When it comes to salary, the paychecks that he's actually going to be receiving, none of them are guaranteed. This is important to keep in mind, because Zeke is also in a mindset in which he knows that what he has left to earn from that contract is not a sure thing. And now that he's facing this situation in which the Cowboys might be interested in moving on, he needs to know that he might be interested in something similar to what happened with DeMarcus Lawrence last year. Didn't have no guaranteed salary left on his deal. So the win-win situation there was, all right, we'll knock down my salary, but you're going to guarantee it. That's important to know in this conversation. So that was his salary, $10.9 million for 2023. The cap number, including the prorated bonuses, all of that, 16.7. That's a big number. That's the one the Cowboys want to lower heading into the 2023 season. Now, we get to the cap savings. $4.86 million. That's the potential savings if the Cowboys decide to actually move on from Zeke. I think this one is huge. And it sounds logically. That is a one number that really matters in this whole conversation. And while that sounds super obvious and dumb, I will say this. Seems to me that everyone focuses too much on the dead money aspect of this, because there's also dead money. And that means, the amount of money that the team needs to account for, even if they move on from him. And that number is at around $11.8 million for the Cowboys if they release him in 2023. But that's sunk cost. Like, that money is going to be accounted for whatever happens. And I say this because it's important to know that while it is an important number, it shouldn't really impact too much the decision of the Cowboys, because it all comes down to your potential possibilities. If you cut him, then you save $4.86 million in cap space. That means that if you agree to a pay cut with Ezekiel Elliott, the amount that he lowers his salary should be greater than the cap savings if you cut him. That's what the Cowboys are going to be asking Ezekiel Elliott when they meet in those negotiation tables, because we know that's happening. There are reports out there saying that Zeke and his agents are going to try to get a feel for what his market value would be if he was a free agent, in order to understand what their options look like and what his options actually are. But I think that's an important, aspect to this conversation. If Ezekiel Elliott accepts a pay cut, it has to be greater than $5 million. If we're going to round that number up, $4.86 million, let's round it up to $5 million for simplicity's sake. That means that pay cut could lower Zeke's salary to around $6 million at least. I think that is the most important aspect of this conversation. If you are the Cowboys, you want Zeke, and if you agree to a pay cut, you want your cap savings to be more than if you cut him. Period. There is no getting around that. What would that look like? That new number, it would probably become fully guaranteed money for Zeke, and that is achievable via a bonus, whether it is a roster bonus or a signing bonus, and guaranteed salary. This happened more or less with DeMarcus Lawrence last year. I've mentioned it a few times here on the show, but I wanted to really put it on the table. What would that look like for the Cowboys and Zeke? Because we talk about pay cuts all the time, but we do have to understand that say that Zeke drops his salary from $10.9 million to $5 million. Whatever he drops his number is going to be, the final number is going to be fully guaranteed. But that's what you would be looking for. You would be looking for a lower cap number, and Zeke would be looking to secure some of the money that he doesn't have secured or guaranteed right now. Let's see what you guys have to say in the chat. Cuba Mo says, Stephen White, thank you for tuning in. John Jones says, let's have a pay cut for him. Charlene says, keep Zeke. He protects Dak's blindside. Pay cut for Bruce. And the fan base is split. That's what I love about this conversation. That's what I wanted to start the week having it. Sean says, he's not worth $6 million. Time to move on from Zeke, says Sean. Toxic Tom says, how does Zeke even fit in a West Coast offense? He is low, often hurt, terrible in the screen game, and was arguably the third best back on the roster. Just move on. And ultimately, it comes down to those two questions. I've narrowed it down to two. Number one, does Ezekiel Elliott want to drop his number that much? Does he want to drop his salary from $10.9 million all the way down to probably $5 million? Let's say that he drops his salary by $6 million, $11 million salary becomes a $5 million salary, mostly guaranteed. He wants to stay in Dallas. Maybe his agents figure out in the combine that that's more or less what he is going to get without much guaranteed money. That's the number one question here from Zeke's side. From the Cowboys side, it does become, is he worth it? If you know you're going to move on from him eventually, because that is happening, he's not likely to play out his contract, which runs through 2026. Are you going to be dealing with this same headache over and over again? Or are you going to move on from him? And we'll get into the pros and cons tonight. But I think that the Cowboys are in a position in which maybe that pay cut is not that attractive. Maybe you just want to save the $4.86 million for 2023 and move on. Here is, and we're going to get into more pros and cons, but here is the biggest pro to agreeing to a pay cut with Zeke. Here is the way that the Cowboys actually win in that scenario. They might open more cap space than if they just cut him. Because as I said, and just circling back to the main aspect of the show, you save $4.86 million on if you cut him. But if you grab Zeke's contract and you say, you know what, we're going to drop it $6 million on the salary, and we're going to take some of that and that final number that we're going to pay you and we're going to guarantee you, we're going to turn it into a signing bonus, which is prorated throughout the length of the contract. You might find yourself in a situation in which you open up like $8-9 million in cap space instead of 4.86. So if the Cowboys want that cap relief in 2023 because they have the intention of maybe signing a big name free agent, like I'm just going to throw that number out, that name out there, OBJ, and they also want to keep a lot of the players that are going to become free agents, and maybe they want to be proactive with Trayvon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, blah, blah. Maybe they want the cap space in 2023, and maybe you decide to go the pay cut route because you know that you can open up way more cap space than if you just cut him. But as I said, there are pros and cons to this whole thing. The biggest pro from moving on, conversely, would likely just be you move on from a declining player and you start fresh on what has been a bad decision since it happened. The contract that they gave Zeke has been a poor decision, and we've seen the results of that. And we were concerned about it too when it happened. I think not everyone was sold on the Zeke deal from the start. Let me see some of your comments here, but first let me shout out Mr. John Jones for his super chat, for his comment, and your donation, sir. Thank you very much. Zeke is low, says the guru, Eddie Lacy 2.0. What if Pollard gets hurt? Ooh, we'll talk about that, though, because he's already hurt. Shout out to Professor O, saying Zeke needs to go from $10.9 million to $10.9. Toxic Tom goes lower than that. He says, my offer for Zeke is $0 and to seek employment elsewhere. Circling back also to what Toxic had asked before, he asked about the West Coast offense role for Zeke. It is kind of a big knock on Zeke that he can't catch. I mean, he can, but he has never been a threat in the receiving game, whether that is because the Cowboys didn't ask him to be one or because he just isn't built for that, to put it one way. What's up, Jeff? Thank you for tuning into the show. Stephen and Jerry are too damn loyal sometimes, says Mark Aaron. Guru says, with a deep running back draft class and guys with more speed and playability, we are referring to keep a slow, limited running back. David Lawrence says, we need to keep Tyron because Steele won't be back right away, says David Lawrence, of course, talking about Steele's knee injury, which is going to be something to monitor very, very closely moving forward here. So ultimately, it's difficult to figure out what their position, what the decision is going to be regarding Ezekiel Elliott. I have an additional question for you. We started the show off by asking, what do you think they should do? Should the Cowboys cut, seek, or reach a pay cut? That was the number one question. Now, the number two question is, what do you think they will do? What do you think Stephen and Jerry Jones and Will McClay, whoever, is involved in that decision, what do you think they will do? Let me know in the chat. And while you do that, and before I give you my answer on that, let's talk about the people who make this show possible. Those are our good friends over at freemanmazda.net, because it's time to talk about the ride of the week. As always, remember that you can check out their dealership over at Irving, Texas, or you can check out their website over at freemanmazda.net, a family-owned business for over 65 years, A-plus customer service. And when you choose Freeman Mazda, you are choosing a lifelong partnership with your car dealer. And as we do around this time every single night, we do have the ride of the week, and this is a nice one. It is a 2023 CX-5 2.5S Carbon Edition all-wheel drive. This one starts at $32,390. It's got a sunroof, all-wheel drive, Wi-Fi hotspot, which is a game changer, premium audio, heated leather, memory foam seating, and a miles per gallon capacity of 24 when you are in the city. That goes up to 30 when you are in the highway. So make sure that you check out the ride of the week over at freemanmazda.net. Once more, that is freemanmazda.net. Check it out. Let's see, what do you think they will do? Some of these answers are aggressive, man. Jay says, cut his slow ass. Professor O says Ryan Nall never ran for 2.38 yards per carry in the playoffs. I think he might not take it, says Catera. Ooh, that's also a possibility, man. Zeke's camp might be, optimistic in getting a better deal elsewhere. Now, let's add some context to that, shall we? We should. Let me fire up really quickly the running back values around the NFL, just to get a notion of, average, which is never super accurate, like, just going by average per year. Let's see if we can share the screen really quickly here. All right, this is the average per year of the top running backs over at overthecap.com. Obviously, you've got your top paid guys over here, 16, 15. Zeke is still number 3 in this list, even though that deal was signed a long time ago. That should tell you everything about how he reset the market in a negative way. If we go down to, say, those guys that are earning $5 million on average, you get guys like Cordell Patterson and Rashad Penny under $5 million on average per year. You get guys like Gus Edwards, J.D. McKissick, Najee Harris over with the Steelers, Travis Etienne. As you can see, a lot of rookie contract players here. So, hey, you know what? He might get more than $5 million elsewhere. He might. Let's see some of your context, some of your answers here. Toxic Tom says, oh, they will make the wrong decision, 100%. Mitesh says, I definitely have thought he has been bad for 2 to 3 years now. What about Damian Harris, says Jeff Clark? Thinking of alternatives already. Could be. I mean, there are a lot of free agents also. I know we've talked about the draft, but there are also going to be some interesting names in free agency. Dwayne Brown says they will redo his contract. He need to be paid as if he's getting 12 touches a game. He's got his money. I think before prepping for this show, I would have bet on the pay cut. I'm not that sure anymore. I'm not that sure. I just think it's smarter to move on from Zeke at this point. And let's get into the pros and cons. I made a list. I made a list on the good old notebook. What's a pro of, keeping Zeke on a pay cut? Definitely, to me, it boils down to the Cowboys getting more cap savings in 2023 because they would get more cap savings if they do it right, which they would. Like if they reach that pay cut, I know that we love to hate on the front office, but being real, they would probably get like $7, $8 million in cap savings out of the pay cut instead of 5 million, less than five actually. Uh, Another pro, it's simply that throughout the regular season, Zeke and Pollard, the duo, kind of worked. I mean, and we were excited about it. Of course, the whole production went down towards the end, and it was a downward slope as the Cowboys dealt with Terrence Steele's injury and all of that. So there are a lot of other variables that go into it. But overall, if we're going by the regular season, that duo worked. Zeke and Pollard worked as a duo. And then another pro is just the fact that you probably need two running backs in the West Coast offense. Regardless of who it is, you need two running backs in the West Coast offense. Or at least McCarthy loved to have two backs on his formations on his time in Green Bay. So I don't think this is one of those years in which Dallas will get to the regular season with two running backs on the roster or anything like that. That would be the pro. But also at the same time, you can get you can get the bodies elsewhere. It doesn't have to be Ezekiel Elliott. The cons, to me, it comes down to, keeping Zeke's contract for more years instead of just ripping off the Band-Aid and moving on. Zeke, it has a real decline. I mean, his numbers have been going down year after year. And I'm not talking about yards per carry exclusively. I'm talking about the explosive plays. Zeke is not generating explosive plays for the Cowboys, and it's not the first year that he doesn't do that. And the comparisons between him and Tony Pollard couldn't be more clear in this area. Pollard generates a lot more explosive plays. Zeke doesn't. The other con from moving on, the wait, yeah, one of the other cons of moving on from Zeke, let's call it like that. Sorry if that got confusing. Maybe my pros and cons went both ways here on the list, but you get it. One of the cons of moving on from Zeke is just that it will be another question mark to a running back position that already has plenty. Because we don't really know how Tony Pollard will look like in 2023. Because it was a fibula fracture, as you guys know. And that sounds like a pretty serious injury for a running back specifically. Maybe we wouldn't be this concerned on other positions, but I mean, we love to talk about Pollard's explosiveness. How is that going to be affected? And I'm not saying that Zeke is the most promising insurance policy, but it does play into the Cowboys' decision that maybe they want to, keep number 21 around just in case. Just in case. The real Darrell says, I am not mad at any of these players trying to get paid, especially at running back. Oh no, go, go players. Like get paid, get that money. But since we're looking at this from the point of view of the Cowboys, we'll always probably cover. And I think that's maybe one of the biases of fans just looking at things from the team's perspective, because that's your main interest, right? As a fan. But that's a good point from the real Darrell. Charlene says losing Zeke is detrimental to the Cowboys, especially if the Eagles pick him up. My question to that is it though? Katara Jones says, Mo, how would you feel if the Diggs brothers played on the same team? I would love that. And I know that Trayvon is out there playing about that possibility and talking about it. I don't see it happening, of course, not anytime soon at least. I think that both stay put, but it would be fun as heck watching those two players play on the same team. And who knows, maybe they one up the Kelseys, right? And they play in the Super Bowl as teammates, not as rivals. Malik Davis, says Sean, is capable of carrying the load if Pollard injury drags into the season. And it goes, Malik Davis, a potential day 2 or day 3 draft pick that you make. Because no, I am not interested. I am not interested in drafting, you know, Robinson in the first round. I know that that's a conversation right now. I do not want another first round running back. Do not give me that, please. I'm begging you. Now, Pale Moon says post Yoon first cut or over 50 million in cap savings. Wait, that's not right. I say cut him and save the money. Let him test the market that doesn't want him. Just to be clear, you don't get $50 million in cap savings. That would be crazy. The actual number for a post June 1 cut is $10.9 million, which is essentially his salary for 2023. The problem with that is, though, you don't get those savings until after June 1st. And of course, that means you don't get it for free agency, which is the moment in time in which you probably need it the most. There is an idea floating around. Jesus wants to get rid of Dak Prescott via a trade. Toxic Tom says, I remember when so many Dallas fans were salty because we let Murray walk and he signed with Philly, was 100% the correct pragmatic choice. And then we went right back and did what Philly did. Now, that's funny because, I think that the running back discourse was not nearly as popular as it is right now with how popular analytics have become and all of that. And I think that's okay. I think that back in 2015, which is when that happened, when the Cowboys moved on from Marco Murray after the 2014 season, I think at least speaking from experience, I wasn't that familiar with the entire running back zone matter discourse. Wasn't familiar with DVOA, with EPA per play, all of that. Honestly, I was 15 years old when it happened. But yeah, I think that the discourse around it was very different from right now. Another example of how this front office is so freaking awful, says Toxic. Elvis says, cut him, get more with the money saved, says Elvis. Now, the other part of this whole thing is what happens with Tony Pollard. What happens with Tony Pollard? Because Street says, just a curiosity, what team would you all like for Zeke to go for him to continue his career and prosper? That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. I have not thought about that. I think that's worth the discussion. I'll see if some people have some suggestions in the chat. But somebody, here it goes. The real Daryl. This is the one that I was looking for. I'm sorry. Are we sure that we want Dallas to pay Tony Pollard on the franchise tag? I would be okay with the franchise tag. I'm not sure if I want them to. I'm sure that I don't want him to pay big money on a long-term deal. Not a fan of the franchise tag, but if they decide to move on from Zeke, I'm okay with tagging Pollard and keeping him around for another year. $10.9 million would be the number of the franchise tag for him, I think. 10.1. I think that's doable. It sucks that it wouldn't be flexible at all. Like that number would be set in stone and that would be it. But I'm not opposed to not paying Pollard because it could be the same mistake as the one that we're talking about right now about the Cowboys if they pay him big time. Anywhere in the AFC, says Jeff Clark about, where Zeke is going to end up in. Yeah, I wouldn't mind moving on from Pollard too. I don't think that the Cowboys do that, though. I will say I'm up for tagging him, though, just to be clear. I'm up for tagging him because although I agree that maybe running backs don't matter that much and what you need is a top-tier offensive line and everything, I think that Pollard has the one thing that can make a difference, and that is, the ability to catch the football consistently, and he can also generate explosive plays, and that's what you want out of him. So specifically because he's an explosive back, I'm interested in him returning for another year. I would love it if the Cowboys, though, take that aggressive choice and show a little bit more aggression and maybe proactiveness when it comes to you know building the roster. Pale Moon says, Mo, the 50 million savings for cutting Zeke post June 1st is over the next 4 years, including the 10.9 million this year. Oh, I mean, okay. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Now, I wouldn't look at it that way. I just would look at it from the moment in time in which you actually cut him. I think that's the most accurate way to cover it, because the cap savings, technically you're getting them in 2023, and then next year, I mean, you have that money and all, but the contract is not really there. You're not making the decision in that year. You're making the decision in 2023. But I see what you mean, but that's why I got confused. Mike Moss says they are over the cap right now. The Cowboys are. And yeah, they are. But then at the same time, they really are not. Because, I mean, they are. What I mean is they can figure that out quickly by extending or restructuring Dak Prescott and then restructuring DeMarcus Lawrence and Zach Martin. That alone opens up more than $30 million. And we talked a little bit about it on the show last week. So I'm not very concerned. What I mean is I'm not very concerned about them being over the cap right now, because that can go away like that in one day. In one day, they can get under the cap significantly by $30 million. And I do think that extension is coming for Dak. And I think that is the right call too, because that's why you set up the contract the way that you set it up. So that's happening, I think. Worst case scenario, they restructure him. I don't think that they play that aggressive by, just letting Dak play out his current contract. I don't think that will happen. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight here on ADZ Sports Dallas Primetime. I think that the one number that really matters in Ezekiel Elliott's decision is the cap savings. And I think that the pay cut should be based entirely off of that. We'll see what happens. But right now, I am doubting a little bit whether or not Zeke is a Dallas Cowboy in 2023. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, you can check out more content over on adcsports.com/Dallas. As always, do me a favor and hit the like button. Share the stream. If you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, let your friends know about ADC Sports Dallas. I am here every single night at 8 p.m. Central, and I'm looking forward to this offseason with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Check out freemanmazda.net, and I will see you mañana. Que tengan un excelente inicio de semana. Adiós.